Arsenal 1, Bournemouth 0. David Luiz's goal, the difference on this week's edition. We'll be looking back at that game. We'll be looking at the league table and where that leaves Arsenal going into the international break. And we'll be taking some of your questions live. Hello, good morning, and welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast brought to you by the last man standing with loserpool.com. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Symeou. It's Monday morning. It's a little bit gloomy. The weather's not great here in London. Winter is truly starting to settle in. But Arsenal have got another 3 points on the board, a huge win over Bournemouth in the end. Not the greatest of performances, but we'll come on to that in a moment. But the point here is that we should be pleased. Arsenal now sit in third place, just a point behind last season's champions, Manchester City. And, we've not played great, but the signs are positive, in terms of the results anyway. And we'll come on to touch on the performances in a minute, because I've seen lots of exchanges on social media over the last few days between Arsenal fans, some ecstatic at the fact that Arsenal find themselves in the position that they're in, just a point behind City, third, etc. But there are others who are concerned in regards to the performances. And I think that both sides have a point here in this debate. So I'm going to go into the game in a little bit more detail. I'm going to go into my thoughts on individual performances and then my thoughts on that very debate. Can Arsenal sustain this position given the way we're performing? So lots and lots to discuss on this edition. So without further ado, let's get into the game itself. Arsenal run out 1-0 winners after David Luiz's header gave the Gunners the lead in the first half. And it was a great header from David Luiz. He got across his man. It was Pepe that took the corner. Luiz got in front of his man. And what he does really well is he directs the header in the one place that he should. He puts it across the goalkeeper, which always gives you a chance of scoring. It's not the most powerful of headers. And, maybe from a Bournemouth perspective, you'd be a bit disappointed in your goalkeeper. But the way David Luiz gets across the front post and sort of glances, directs the header is fantastic. And he deserves a lot of credit for that. And I've criticised David Luiz in recent weeks for, sort of giving away goals and being a bit of a liability at the back at times. But David Luiz showed yesterday what he can give you in the attacking third. And he's a lot better at that than many other central defenders. And David Luiz has that in his locker. He can be effective. I think there was a moment the other night in Manchester where David Luiz put two really good crosses in with his left foot. And it just goes to show that the technical ability of David Luiz is there. It's on par with some of the best central defenders in the world. But in terms of his defending, at times that leaves a lot to be desired. But, he deserves credit yesterday. We kept the clean sheet. And David Luiz, of course, scored the winner. If we just have a quick look at some of the statistics, they're up on your screen for those of you watching us on YouTube. 53% possession for the Gunners. Bournemouth with 47. So not a huge difference there. Arsenal with 12 attempts at goal. Bournemouth with 10. Again, not much difference there. Shots on target, 2 apiece. Arsenal had 14 corners compared to Bournemouth's 5. And Arsenal committed 12 fouls compared to Bournemouth 6. So those are the statistics. Let's move on to the team now. Let's have a look at some of the individual performances. So Unai Emery opted to go with a lineup of Bernd Leno in goal. Back four of Sead Kolasinac, David Luiz, Sokratis and Chambers. Now, many people wondered whether Holding and Tierney would get a game. Having played 90 minutes on Thursday, I think it was always going to be the case that they were going to be left out on Sunday. And I think in Unai Emery's defence, we're looking at two players that are going to be very important for us over the course of the season. Two players who have been out for a long time, who have had serious injuries and serious injury problems. So I'm not against them being left out. It worked yesterday, and Unai Emery would have weighed that up, the risk against the reward. And I think that Bournemouth at home is the type of game that you should be able to get buy-in without them, and we did. So Unai deserves credit for that. It's a bold decision, because I'm sure many Arsenal fans would have picked both of those two in the starting lineup. Hector Bellerin was left out of the squad. Hector Bellerin looked rusty to me on Thursday, and he's going to need time to get back. And of course, he's been out for longer than anybody. But, he did look noticeably rusty, I'd say, on Thursday night. So I'm not against, him being left out from the squad. He needs to manage the recoveries of these players properly. And at times in the past, we haven't done so. And we've seen players, suffer injuries, and those injuries last a long, long time. So, I'm okay with that. The midfield was Xhaka, Guendouzi, but there was no place for Torreira. Dani Ceballos came in to play a sort of number 10 role. Pepe was deployed on the right, Saka on the left, and Aubameyang through the middle. Let's quickly run over to some of your comments here. Those of you that are watching live, a big good morning to you all. Hubert says good morning. Kathy says good morning. Good morning to you too. Winston says good morning. What else have we got here? Big shout out to Claude from AFTV. Hit up his channel on YouTube. It's a brilliant channel. Claude, as always, says it how it is. Brilliant channel, great opinion. So please check Claude's channel out as well. Kathy says we have so many creative players, but we don't gel together. It feels that way at the moment, Kathy. It feels like we've got a squad full of talented individuals, but we're not quite finding the right balance. But again, we'll come on to the performance side of things in just a moment. Claude says he's the most cautious coach I've seen in my time in watching football. Don't disagree with you there, mate. Kathy also says it's boring football, but we need to have a regular team to be exciting again. And James says, as long as we keep winning these games, we're actually in the title race. As silly as it sounds, Liverpool can't lose or they're in big trouble. So, James, you think Arsenal are in the title race? Interesting. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about that. I'm not so sure we can say that we're in the title race at this point anyway. But going back to the team, let's have a look at some of the individual performances. I thought Callum Chambers was really good again. Showed passion, showed fight, and showed that he's improved a great deal. And I think playing a lot of regular football last season, albeit in a team that at the end of the day got relegated, I think done Callum Chambers the world of good. I think Socrates and Lewis did okay without being spectacular, but they weren't bad by any means. I thought Kolasinac had moments where he showed what he's all about, and that is bringing the ball forward almost like a train. He just gets his head down, and there were a couple of moments where Bournemouth were attacking, and his sort of physicality and power, I'd say, got him out of situations as he was able to bring the ball out of the defence. Granit Xhaka, the Arsenal captain, a player who's taken a lot of stick from fans of late, I thought had an okay game yesterday. Again, without being spectacular, I thought he did pretty well. I thought he did the simple things yesterday. That could be a sign of somebody whose confidence is beat. But, there wasn't many of those suicidal passes. There wasn't any really outrageous attempts from Granit Xhaka to play, any silly balls. I thought he got the ball, he played it simple, he let Ceballos do that sort of thing. And I guess that's what Arsenal fans want to see from Granit Xhaka. Is the fact that he's down on confidence having an impact on his game? I think it is. But given the hysteria that surrounded Granit Xhaka and the criticism he's faced, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think if he gets his head down, stays out of the headlines a little bit, and concentrates on doing the simple things right, I think a lot of fans will get off his back. So, fingers crossed that is the case. I thought Guendouzi was brilliant again. As brilliant as anyone can be in what was overall a pretty dull performance. But I thought Guendouzi was pretty good. I'd say he was probably our best player again. Energetic, always looking to receive the ball, never afraid, never hiding. And I like that about Guendouzi. Dani Ceballos, I thought, did an okay job in that number 10 role. I've seen some people saying that, this means we should bin Mesut Ozil off permanently because Dani Ceballos had an okay game. Well, it was exactly that, wasn't it? It was an okay game. Dani Ceballos wasn't brilliant in my view. Nobody was brilliant. So, it just feels like some people are using Ceballos' okay performance to poke at Mesut Ozil again. And, lots of people would disagree with me on Ozil, and they don't want to see him back in the team. But I still think he's an option. I still think he's good enough to be in that 18, and very little is going to change my mind on that. Reece Nelson, is another example of a player who's had a few chances, not necessarily taken them. and he's been left out. So Emery's been ruthless in some ways, but his ruthlessness has not been consistent. And I think that's where some people have a problem. Nicola Pepe started on the right-hand side, and he was all right. He was okay. Again, I know people are expecting a lot more from Nicola Pepe. I'm one of those people. I also accept that, he needs some time to settle down. But I thought he was a little bit better yesterday than he had been in previous games. And I know that's not saying much because he's been poor largely this season. But, I thought he did okay, particularly in the first half. I thought it was right to take him off because, it wasn't happening for him. And maybe it's time to give him a little bit of a break for a couple of games and see how he approaches games in terms of coming off as a sub, because I think it's very different. I think you can come on, you can give everything in a 20, 25 minute period, depending on when you're introduced. And I think that might do him a little bit of good now. I also appreciate that doing that may absolutely batter his confidence. And I don't want that to be the case, of course. But, we'll have to see. Bukayo Saka on the left, he did okay. Again, not fantastic. But he's young. He's obviously jumped ahead of Reece Nelson in the pecking order. I thought that there was a real shout for Martinelli to get a game from the start yesterday. I thought Martinelli, has performed fantastically in every game he's played. So, I've got no problem with that. With him not playing because he played the full 90 minutes on Thursday. But, I thought that he's deserved the chance. And he did get a bit of a go, and credit to Emery for bringing him on and giving him a bit of a run out. Thought he injected some pace and some energy into our game when he did come on. So, hats off to Gabriel Martinelli. And Bukayo Saka still learning. Done okay yesterday. Wasn't great, though, in my opinion. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang feeding off scraps. Again, due to a lack of creativity in this Arsenal side. And again, we can talk about the Ozil thing, which lots of people, have strong views on. But I get the feeling that Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang will be sitting there quietly thinking, I wish Mesut Ozil was in this side. Because I think that he's a player who can really benefit from what Ozil has to offer. In terms of the performance overall, we've had lots and lots of debates on Twitter over the last 24 hours. There are those who say, who gives a shit? We won, we're third. It doesn't really matter what the performance was like. Stop moaning, stop criticizing. But I guess I'm of the viewpoint that it's okay to be pleased with the position that we find ourselves in. But you shouldn't disregard the fact that we've been poor for the most part of this season in terms of our performances. And that tells you that over the course of the season, I should say, you're not going to get away with those performances. And last season, we had many games where we didn't perform and we got points. But come the end of the season, because we weren't in any rhythm, because our performances were so bad, it came back to haunt us and it balanced itself out. And we ended up missing out on the top four. And my fear is I don't want that to happen again. I think Arsenal have a lot more to offer than what we're currently seeing. Arsenal certainly have the talent there. I think Arsenal are fortunate at the moment that Manchester United is so bad. Tottenham find themselves in disarray. Chelsea, they've got a bright future ahead of them, but they're young still. And with young players come inconsistencies. So, yes, you shouldn't be sitting here going, oh, that was crap yesterday. And you shouldn't be going overboard about it because we did win. But I think that if you've got the best interest of the club at heart, then it's silly to overlook something that is as important as those performances. Because, we weren't convincing yesterday, and it only takes one moment from Bournemouth towards the end of the game yesterday, and we're talking about a draw rather than a win because we didn't have enough to put the game to bed. And, yes, you could say it was a professional performance. I don't think it was a professional performance. I think Arsenal were bad and Bournemouth were just as bad as well. And one moment decided the game. Both sides had 2 attempts on target. Shows you that it was a very poor quality game in which neither side were at the races. So, yeah, it's absolutely right to have those concerns in regards to the performances. It doesn't mean you're being negative. It doesn't mean you're not supporting your team. It's just an acknowledgement of the fact that the way we're playing And, if we continue to play that way, the position of third is not sustainable. That's all people are saying. So I'm not sure why people are arguing about that. It's neither here nor there, really. It is fine to have a slightly different opinion. It's fine to be worried about the way we're playing, but also be pleased with the 3 points. I don't get why people don't see that. Let's have a quick look at some of your comments again. James LJP says, here's a little game for you, mate. Go through that starting lineup and slap a price tag on them, what you feel they're worth at the moment. James, I'm going to be doing something like that in the international break, so I'm going to save that for now, but we're going to be doing some various bits of content around the team and the playing staff and looking at them individually over the international break. I don't want to reveal too much, but to keep your eyes peeled for that, because we are doing something very similar. Michael says that Ceballos was great. He covers a lot of grass. He also says Saka and Martinelli are now ahead of Nelson. Callum Ferguson asks, what do you make of the rumours of Ozil telling the under-23s to pretend he took a session? I've not actually come across that rumour, mate. So I can't really comment on it. And, it feels like people are just finding any excuse to have a go at Mesut Ozil. And, for me, it's as simple as this. Unai Emery doesn't want him in the side. Don't know why. Not sure why. If it's about work rate, I think that's silly. He's obviously been forced out of the team now, and he's going to, be suffering for a while, it looks like. But, if Unai Emery's picking up the results, then, nobody's really going to have that much to say. But when those games do come, when Arsenal struggle to break teams down, then people are going to look at that decision. And rightly so. They're going to point the finger at Unai Emery, because ultimately, this is his decision. This is his choice. I'm sure if Mesut Ozil's asked to play, he's going to play. So, it's a debate that's going to rumble on. There's no question about that. Now that Arsenal says them performances aren't sustainable, sooner or later we will get caught out. 2 shots on target in the whole 90 minutes against Bournemouth at home isn't good enough. I agree, mate. Let's see what else we've got here. Lots of comments coming through live at the moment. Winston says that 22 game unbeaten run last season flattered us in many games. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think I said that at the time. And I think I got absolutely battered for it. Because when people were getting on the hype train of Unai Emery's Arsenal, I was cautious. I wasn't sure. I wasn't, sure that we were doing things right. I wasn't sure that what we were doing was sustainable. And in the end, it wasn't. Arsenal did fall apart at the end. Arsenal did show weaknesses. So, it's hard, isn't it? Because people want to argue, people want to debate, and that's fine. But for me, the signs are there. We know exactly what we're getting with this Arsenal team. Not much in the way of improvement. And, we're going to struggle through this season. I think it's going to be a season full of ups and downs. A79 says, what do you think of Emery defending through the second half at home? Had they scored, we would have tried to score and lost. Emery is a coward. I get tightening up in the last 10, 15 minutes, which is what he did when he brought Lucas Torreira on. I get that, and I'm not against that, because we used to criticise Arsene Wenger for not doing that. So I'm not against being a little bit pragmatic towards the end of the game. I am against the negative approach in the second half. And I guess the big difference for me between the two halves was Arsenal came out in the first half and Arsenal pressed. Arsenal forced Bournemouth into mistakes at the back. And then that went away in the second half. And I don't know, is that a fitness issue? What is it? I'm not sure. But it feels like Arsenal's performance really, really did drop off. Now, let's have a quick look at the Premier League table while we're here. Here we go. As we said earlier on, not much to talk about in terms of the game, in terms of action. So we're focusing sort of on the performance, etc. We've touched on the performances of certain individuals today. But if we look at the league table now, of course, Arsenal, as I've already mentioned, sitting in third place with 15 points, just a point off of Manchester City. We've only lost 1 game this season. Only Liverpool have lost fewer, so that's a positive. We have been to Liverpool. We've been to Old Trafford. We've played Spurs. Leicester City are a point behind us in fourth. Chelsea seem to be getting their shit together in 5th with 14 points. Crystal Palace, surprisingly, they've been dark horses this season. Always tipped to be in a relegation fight, but Roy Hodgson's doing a really steady job there, so he deserves credit for that. But we'll be touching on that in a little bit more detail on our Premier League show, a new show that we do here on the Chronicles of a Gooner, where I'll be getting guests from opposition sides, and we'll be talking about the Premier League weekends. So stay tuned for that. That is coming your way tomorrow evening. So please do stay tuned for that. So, the table reads well at the moment. I don't think anybody can deny that. I think that Arsenal, are again fortunate of the circumstances around them. The performances aren't great. I don't really see that much improvement, which is a concern. But, it is very hard to sit and beat a team with a stick who have just won a game. They've just won a Premier League game, moved into 3rd. So let's be pleased with the result, but let's acknowledge that the performances aren't necessarily where they need to be, and that we're going to need to improve in order to sustain that. I don't think anybody denies that. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. If they do, I think you're just trying to defend the manager without really thinking about what it is you're saying. I think there are fans out there that are so eager to see Unai Emery succeed that they won't dare criticize him. And I don't think that you should criticize him this week, but I think that over the course of a season, we're gonna have some troubles if we don't fix up. So let's go to some of your questions now. We're going to hit up Twitter, where some of you have been leaving questions since this morning, I think, actually. I'm not sure when I put the tweet out. Can't remember, if I'm honest. But here we go. Let's share the screen to those of you who are watching live once again. And a big hello to, of course, those listening back. Here's a question from Akshay. He says, do you think Pepe is underperforming or struggling to adapt? If so, is Unai to blame for that, or is the player himself? I think it's a bit of both. I think the team is not necessarily providing Pepe with the platform to go on and perform to the best of his ability, but equally, it's the player's responsibility to perform well. When he gets the opportunities, he's had plenty of opportunities. I feel like we've seen glimpses of what Nicola Pepe can do, but without the end product most of the time, and that's concerning. And I think that a lot of people always say, when a forward is getting himself into the positions, you're okay and you shouldn't worry because the goals will come. But with Nicola Pepe, I really see a lack of belief in himself at the moment, and that's a worry for me. I hope that he turns it around. People always talk about the fact that Bergkamp and Henry took a while to settle in, and that's a very valid point. And maybe we shouldn't be putting too much pressure on the lad, but maybe it's Unai Emery's place now to take him out of the firing line, at least temporarily, so that he can come out of the spotlight and just, get on with things and go about his work quietly without the media spotlight and the hype that is surrounding him at the moment. In terms of more questions, let's have a look at some more. Adioson says, hello, guys. What positions do we need to strengthen in January or summer transfer window? Why can't we press or control possession for long during Premier League games? Cheers. I think you're absolutely right. It is a concern that we can't keep that press going for. It doesn't even have to be 90 minutes, but for the majority of games, when you play such high intensity football, you're going to have break periods. You're going to drop off at certain times. But the fact it's only a half at the moment and not even a full half is worrying. In terms of positions we need to strengthen, I still think our defense leaves a lot to be desired. I still think we need another competent midfield player. So, there's always positions you can improve in this team. I think defense and midfield are the areas for me. I think we've got two very good strikers in Aubameyang and Lacazette. The hope is that Pepe will come good. I think Saka looks like a great prospect, as does Martinelli. So I'm not too fussed about the forward areas at the moment. Melvin says, is it a realistic argument that winning games by 1 goal should not be a problem, as we did that in the Graham era? Harry, you might know my answer. I think it's okay to win games by 1 goal. I don't think there's a problem with that. If you're doing that consistently. The problem is that the Graham sides were set up well and well organized. And so if they did go a goal up, you had faith in them to be able to hold that lead. And so it was down to being clinical in front of goal, but also being watertight defensively. And the problem that Arsenal fans have here is not that they don't want to win games by one goal. It's that they don't trust this team to keep clean sheets. So that's the issue here. For me, if you've got a solid defense and you can trust in them that 9 times out of 10 you're going to hold on to the 1 goal lead, then I'm fine with that. A win is a win, right? 3 points is 3 points. But there is a fear that this Arsenal side are not capable of keeping clean sheets. And that's where people's concern comes from. So I understand that concern. And I think that, it shouldn't be a problem when you're winning, but it will be a problem when you're not. And, taking that approach with a team that are not necessarily competent defensively, it is risky, in my opinion. And it's Unai Emery, shooting himself in the foot. Raul FC says, do you think a fully fit, match-ready sharp squad will have Emery have us playing well? If not, then when do you think the performances will catch up to us? As I think results will eventually match our performances, and we haven't performed well once this season. I said it earlier on in the show. I think that Arsenal last season got a lot of results that their performances didn't necessarily warrant. And over the course of the season, that caught up with us. And that's why we missed out on the top 4. So, Unai Emery in a few weeks' time will have a pretty much fully fit squad. So the excuses run out for me. And if Arsenal's performances don't improve, then it's hard to see how we'll sustain that. So, you've got a right to criticize him at that point, in my opinion. Halls of Marble says, is it ungrateful to feel bad at the performance despite being 3rd in the league? No, it's not ungrateful. I think it's okay to question the performance. Like I've already said, I think it's fine to be pleased with the win, but also want more performance-wise. And I think that that's a fully reasonable stance to take. So when people say, oh, you can't be slagging the performance off when we won, I think that's nonsense. You can criticize a performance whilst being pleased with the result. It is possible to feel those two things at the same time. Now that Arsenal, he asked earlier on, thoughts on Pepe? Did you see improvement yesterday with an assist? And should he have won a pen? I thought, like I said, I thought there was a slight improvement. Not great, but there was a slight improvement. Should he have won a pen? I'm not 100% sure about that. I know Arsenal fans were up in arms about that. I think if you watch it again, I think the ball does come off the defender's leg before Pepe goes down. And so I think, I'm not too fussed about that decision. I don't think it was necessarily a blatant penalty like some people will have you believe. Brett Stevenson says, do you think Emery's job is safe even if we finish in the top 4, bearing in mind we've struggled to beat teams like Villa and Bournemouth? I think for the time being, I think Emery's job is safe. I think he's going to get this season without any sort of questions being asked by the board. But if Emery does get us in the top 4, some people would say it's harsh if he wasn't allowed to carry on the job that he started. I think if he does get us in the top 4, he's done what he was brought into the club to do. And for that, he deserves immense credit. But if performances don't improve, then I would question at the end of the season, if we have made the top 4, right, is Emery now the man to take us to that next level? And in my opinion, based on what he's shown, I don't think he is. But again, we've got to see how the season goes before we make that call 100%. So, we'll hold fire on that judgment for the time being. Again, big hello to everybody watching us live. Apologies that the title change hasn't filtered through on the live stream. So for some reason, it still says Arsenal 4, Standard Liège 0. I'm going to edit that once we finish this live broadcast. Can't change it once we've started, unfortunately, which is a little bit annoying. Big hello to Gozmaz in Cyprus. He says, we've had only one bad result all season, the Watford game. The performances may have not been great, but you can only go by the results. Again, I'll reiterate the point. I think the performances over the course of the season will catch up with you. So in the short term, I think you're right. But yeah, I think over the course of the season, it does catch up. Nick brings up the title issue. Is the title of this video wrong or something? Why are you still talking about Standard Liège? It is, mate. have edited the title, but it's not filtered through to the various platforms. So apologies about that. Again, that will be edited as soon as I finish this live broadcast, and it will correct itself. So thank you for your patience on that. Just one final point, actually, that I wanted to make. And we always talk about Arsenal's defence, and we always talk about the fact that we make it easy for teams, that we give them lots of space in the attacking areas, and we don't defend effectively. Now, I watched Inter versus Juventus last night. As many of you know, I'm a huge Serie A enthusiast. I do a lot of work covering Serie A. We'll be back tomorrow night with a Simply Serie A podcast, where we'll be looking back at that huge Derby d'Italia between Inter and Juve. And there was something I picked up on when watching Juve defend that is a point that I've been trying to get across in regards to Arsenal for a long, long time. So I wanted to just highlight that. And there were a few occasions yesterday where Inter were breaking on Juventus. It was at the end of the first half, I think, where I really, really noticed it. And Inter won the ball back. I think it was Lukaku who won the ball. And he broke forward. And Inter all of a sudden had a 3 versus 4. Now, when we talk about Arsenal's defence, and I'm going to use these diagrams here so you can see me now sort of moving the players. And if I just move these guys out of the way, just so we can focus on the defence for a minute. Inter broke on Juve. And if this was Arsenal, you know, the first thing would be often when caught on the break, you'd see Chambers up there, you'd see Kolasinac up there, and Sokratis and Lewis would be forced to split like this to try and cover the entire width of the pitch. And for me, that's a real problem. It's a real problem. It happens often, and often there are too many spaces in between the lines, and the Gunners, find themselves on the ropes and in real serious trouble. But what Juventus did was really, really interesting. And this is not necessarily a Maurizio Sarri thing. It's more of an Allegri thing from the past, I think, that's been embedded. But Juve are no doubt one of the most effective sides defensively in Europe. So I think it's good to look at them as an example. But what you saw whenever Inter broke was this. There's an immediate concern with protecting the middle of the goal, the middle of the penalty area. Defend the width of your penalty area. That's what Juventus do. It's a priority. And you would see, Inter breaking forward with players making runs down these channels here on the left and on the right. But Juve's priority was to protect the width of that penalty area. And I think that is the right way to defend. And I think that's something that Arsenal should be looking to take on board. You protect the width of your box. Nobody's going to score from out here or out there. It would have to be something special. So protecting the width of your box is so, so important when defending. And you immediately saw when Inter got the ball, this Juventus back four literally close into this really tight unit. And it was really, really effective. And another team who do that time and time again is Atletico Madrid, another side who are very, very good defensively. It's really, really important to defend the width of your penalty area. And that gives you the best chance of defending successfully. And that was just something that I picked up on watching Juventus in a lot of detail last night. And as I've said, often with Arsenal, the case is one's up here, one's up there. And these two are forced to do that. They're forced to spread apart to cover those channels. And that leaves us, open to being exposed. And I just think that it's something that Arsenal should be looking at. You should look at examples of teams who are defensively very sound, very solid. Inter, gave Juve a game, but Juve are certainly very defensively sound. And Juve, who, weren't exactly at their brilliant best yesterday, ran out 2-1 winners. So they kept it tight. They defended very well, and they had the firepower at the other end of the pitch to do the business and win the game. And Arsenal have that firepower, but they don't necessarily have that defensive unit. And, you can look at some of those Juve players and, yes, they're good individuals, but it's about how they defend as a unit. And I just want to see Arsenal show a bit more unity in the defense. And I think that, that's been a real problem for us in recent years. It's about shape. It's about that transition. It's about getting into the emergency position, if you like, as soon as possible. And Juve really, really do that. They cover the width of their penalty area. That is their priority. They're going to defend their box with their lives. And more often than not, that works. So brilliant stuff. We've come to the end of today's live broadcast. I'm just going to touch on one last question because I know Nick joined us a little bit late. He says, what do you think Chambers' best position is, Harry? He's playing really well at right back and was player of the season at DM for Fulham. Maybe we should give him up playing at centre back. I think with Callum Chambers and a gentleman that was sitting in front of me yesterday, Lee, was saying he's really improved, and I agree with that. But I think the issue with Chambers is he's not necessarily a world beater in any position, but he's decent in playing a few positions. So I think we need to forget about Callum Chambers being an Arsenal centre-half for the next 10 years or whatever, and look at what Callum Chambers has to offer in the sense that of being a utility man. I think he's a fantastic utility man. And that, for me, right now, is where Callum Chambers is best used. Use him at right back, use him at centre back if needed, maybe in the cup games in the Europa League. And, you know, if we need to use him in defensive midfield, that's an option too. So I like the fact that he's been used as a utility man, because I think right now that's probably where he can best serve us. So, yeah. Hope that answers your question. A big thank you to every single one of you who's tuned in, whether you've watched us live, whether you're listening to us on the podcast format. Again, apologies that the video that's going out live has the wrong title to it. We'll get that changed straight away. So we'll be back very, very soon with some more Arsenal-related content. Like I said, Premier League show coming your way, hopefully tomorrow. Simply Serie A's coming your way tomorrow too. It's a very, very busy week for me this week. But we'll be hoping to bring you more and more Arsenal content as we go along. And leading into that international break, we'll be touching on some various other aspects that we may not have necessarily had time to go into in recent weeks. So until then, guys, take care. And we'll be back very, very soon. Cheers.